corruption in boxing here. It's an immediate reaction to the Superfly 2, the main event, which took place in Inglewood, Los Angeles. The headline card was Rungvisai defending his WBC Super Flyweight World Championship belt for the second time from Thailand. And he was taking on his mandatory challenger, one Francisco Estrada from Mexico. A fantastic 12-round competitive fight. Sadisakat was adjudicated the winner, majority decision. One of the judges had it 114 even. 2 of the other judges had it for Sadisakat. One of them specifically had it wide. I think it was 117, 112, which defies logic. Certainly was that. No fighter had a dominant sort of one-sided display. Watching the fight in real time, I had it 6 rounds each. There are some contentious points which I'm going to have to go back and look at. For Estrada may have had one legitimate knockdown. I think Sadisakat hit the canvas twice, maybe Estrada hit the canvas once. Southpaw orthodox, the feeds were getting tangled, but one of the knockdowns I couldn't see any infringement. Looked like a legitimate punch. Rungvisai wasn't hurt, it was a flash knockdown, but to me it appeared to be a knockdown, so that could be significant in terms of scoring the fight. But once I've had an opportunity to review that, I'll post a definitive sort of breakdown. But the fight itself now, Estrada started the fight very well from long distance, utilizing lateral movement. Now Sadisakat, we know, is the epitome of a power puncher. Doesn't really utilize a jab to set up any power punches, so he's coming in there with evil intentions to take your head off, decapitate your body. So he's firing hooks. He's a pressure fighter. He's gonna try and walk you down, impose his will on you. Physically, he's just perfectly built for the 115-pound division. If you look at his foundation, his legs, massive legs, developed from Muay Thai, where he changed over when he was very young. So his punching power is definitely driven from the foundation, and those legs obviously help him absorb punches as well. An extremely disciplined, humble man. So he trains like a madman. 3-4 months training camp. So will be perfectly conditioned. So he's aggressive from the outside. He's not trying to fill you out. So Estrada is not going to engage or fight at mid-range too early. It's not really going to be a jab fest with Sadisakat. So Estrada, one of the best cerebral boxers in boxing, one of the best counter punches there is, period. One of the greatest fighters in boxing to make adjustments, certainly from the current crop. So many times you'll see him having difficulties, but has that ability to try and decipher his opponent, try and, a problem solver, will make the adjustments, and has that ability to come on strong in the second half of fights. He can go for 15 rounds, I believe, and get stronger and stronger from 12 to 15. So Estrada came out strong. I thought he won 2 of the first 3 rounds. My view on him is different from a lot of commentators and people who seem to think that he's a slow starter. They kept commenting on the Carlos Cuadras fight, where they felt he gave up the first half of the fight. Cuadras was the more athletic fighter with the faster hands. Estrada making the adjustments in the second half of the fight to take over the fight and to drop Cuadras, but I disagree with that notion in its entirety. I thought Estrada was magnificent throughout the fight. I felt he won the fight 9 rounds to 3. I felt Estrada was counter-punching from the first minute of the first round. and progressively got better and better, beating him at long range, mid range, and even inside the pocket at times. So early on, Sadisakat, trying to walk down his opponent, trying to knock him out, but Estrada, very patient. He had very good defense throughout the fight. Now, if Sadisakat is thrown 300 more punches, and those punches haven't landed, then surely you have to attribute scoring in that sense to El Gallo's defense. I think he blocked, parried, evaded, rolled a lot of Sadisikat's hooks. Estrada utilizes that T-block type of guard, a guard where the gloves are not together, so it's not a sort of a tight, robust high guard. It's a guard that he tends to push the gloves together horizontally, almost like a vice. So he can see the punches coming, but then he can. It's more of a versatile guard. He can go to a cross guard position to block uppercuts as well. But I think it's a guard that allows him to make the transition from defense to offense a lot quicker. Estrada at long range doesn't really have an authoritative jab. I think the jab is more used to try and set up counter-punching ability. He's a fighter who likes to set a lot of traps, and he will use that jab to try and set up traps. And he did so in this fight, even very early on. He'll fire the jab, but he'll shift to the right, fire a right hand. But his favorite, what he was doing in this fight was, Sadisakat likes to step in with that 1-2 right hook first of all, followed with a left, either a left cross or a left hook. Estrada will slip the right hook, slip to Sadisakat, get the lead foot advantage on the outside, and then he'll come back with a left hand uppercut. And he was hitting Sadisakat with that counter punch throughout the fight. It just reinforces how Estrada is one of the best counter punches in boxing. Period. Tends to model it on his favorite fighter, Juan Manuel Marquez, who was definitely one of the best counter punchers in the last 20 years. Definitely, a tremendous fighter. And Estrada, exemplified a lot of. He has that hybrid sort of Juan Manuel Marquez, Eric Morales type of style. Beautiful, educated left hand as well. Estrada was firing that reverse 1-2, straight right hand forwarded by a left hook to the body. That's really his signature sort of combination. But Sadisakat from rounds 4, 5, 6, 7. He was counter-punching reasonably well in those rounds. He showed, far more patience in this fight, more boxing ability. He was certainly new to the US audiences, but I've seen him back in Thailand in some fights where he's showed a little bit more patience, showed a little bit better footwork, tried, utilizing a little bit more feints as well. So not just the one-dimensional power puncher who's just trying to steamroll opponents, but that's what a confidence does to a champion. You have you've gained more notoriety and recognition, and you have, obviously he has he's commanded better purses, so he can get in better sparring partners, better conditions for preparation. But it's a massive injection of confidence as well, so you can showcase your full skills as well. So good to see improvements in the fighter, even in these past 30 years as well now. So the fight was far more, I think, of a cerebral fight. Certainly during the middle stages, I think Estrada was more punch efficient. He was less conservative. I think he was counter punching better between rounds 4 to 7, And certainly, the knockdowns occurred in those middle rounds as well, which I really need to go back and look at. So there could be one significant swing round towards Estrada, but yeah, maybe it's a little bit too early to give a definitive conclusion on that one. But I didn't feel Rungvisai won all of those 4 rounds outright. I think Estrada had one of those rounds. Estrada came back in the 8th and the 9th, spurred by urgency from his corner. They felt he was down. It could just be mind tricks just to try and galvanize their fighter, try and inject some urgency into Estrada, but he responded, and he came back with dominant displays in the 8th and the 9th. He began to cut the distance, and he does that in all of his fights. At long range against Viloria, he was having trouble. Viloria's shorter fighter kept hitting Estrada when he was coming in from long range to mid range with a straight right hand, and Viloria can certainly punch as well. But Estrada, he calculates the risk, certainly with punches as well, and he likes to cut the distance as the rounds progress. And he puts his punches far better when he's at mid-range, even inside the pocket. Can shorten his punches. He has much better. He's more fluid. Has better hand speed inside the pocket. Just seems to be far more comfortable. And I think he really began to target Rungvisai's body as well. There was visible signs of Rungvisai, slowing down. His face was getting marked up as well. If we look, the face is never lie. Estrada's face was hardly marked up, whereas I think Rungvisai's, his eyes were damaged. There was some puffiness definitely there. He was marked up on the left side of his face, certainly from Estrada's straight right hands, which were connecting throughout the fight. His connect rate was so much better. So if you're looking at clean punching and you're looking at defense, which I've just illustrated, if Rungvisai was far more the active fighter, throwing far more punches, but Estrada is more the efficient fighter, then you can't just be hypnotized by a guy who's just winging away punches. He's a heavier handed fighter, so he's not trying to set up power punches with a jab. So if you're just scoring for a guy who's just winging away punches, but you're not 100% certain that those punches are landing, then that's sort of naive, scoring, very unprofessional. But it is hard at real time with super flyweights who have the ability to throw 100 punches around, smaller fighters. So real time, it is quite difficult for judges, to decipher between what has landed and what has been blocked or even partially blocked. What exactly has hurt a fighter and what hasn't. If Srisakat did significant amount of damage, and we know he's one of the hardest punches, certainly at super flyweight, but if you look at his knockout ratio, it's very, very high. So if Rungvisai was doing damage with power punches, then clearly Estrada's his energy would have been depleted. Estrada's, there would have been damage, facial damage. He would have been hurt, stunned, knocked down. But Estrada, from my eyes, from the eye test, he didn't appear to be significantly hurt at all. I didn't see Estrada disengage after taking any body shots or head shots. He was defensively more conscious during the middle rounds, but that doesn't mean he was hurt or weary of his power. I think he was biding his time. But then he began to accelerate during the 8th, 9th, and the championship rounds. And I think if you look at who was the fresher fighter in those championship rounds, who was landing the more punches, I think it was Estrada. I think he landed the more significant punches. I think he was walking down Rungvisai at times as well. But Rungvisai was smart as well. I think he was almost allowing Estrada sometimes to walk him down so he could try and counter on his own, showing showing a sort of a new niche to his arsenal as well, or surprising Estrada, who Estrada may have thought that he was just a one-dimensional pressure fighter on the front foot. So he was trying to vary his tactics as well to say that, look, maybe I'm giving you the impression that you're having the better of me. But Rungvisai, with a right hook, was counter-punching. He was sometimes getting... he countered Roman Gonzalez with the right hook very well. We know the knockdowns against Gonzalez was with his right hook as opposed to his patented left hand. So it's wrong just to typecast him as a one-handed fighter. He has far more boxing ability. But Estrada, I think in the latter rounds, showed urgency, showed real commitment and determination. He was brave, courageous, to cut the distance, to trade with Rungvisai, a much heavier-handed, and a natural 115-pound fighter. Estrada is coming up in weight. Let's not forget. So credit to Estrada, for trying to make it a firefight. You've got to try and break down your opponent. You've got to try and win his respect. You can't allow the heavy-handed fighter to dictate, to try and, you've got to show that risk, and a calculated risk. And Estrada did that. He's trying to be a super flyweight world champion. Sometimes you just have to gamble, put all your chips down and say, if I'm going to get knocked out, so be it. But I'm going to try and endeavour, to try and win the fight as well. So credit to Estrada. The scoring, as I mentioned, 114 even. I couldn't really argue with that. That's exactly how I scored the fight real time. Two of the other judges had it for the champion, Rungvisai now. Had it been a 115, 113 Rungvisai, fair enough. I think that's a reasonable sort of parameter for scoring a close competitive fight. But 117-12, as I reiterate, that's a ludicrous. Ludicrous judging from whoever submitted those cards. I can certainly see a 7-5 for Estrada, but it's certainly dependent on one of those knockdowns. If there was a if their feet had tangled, which caused Rungvisai to go down, then you have to credit the referee for correctly adjudicating that as a no knockdown. But from the naked eye, it looked like a punch landed and there was no entanglement. There was no infringement in terms of Estrada pushing his man down to the canvas. So it doesn't matter whether it's a flash knockdown or whether it was an off-balance shot. If Rungvisai touched down, then you have to score that a 10-8. Or if Rungvisai was dominating that particular round, then maybe an even round. But so overall, a great fight, and I hope Fernando Beltran can lobby for a rematch. I think as Juan Francisco certainly warrants a rematch, and I think the crowd enjoyed it. A very good nip and tuck sort of 12-round competitive fight with high level of skill from both fighters, both of them are definitely pound for pound fighters. If you look at their resumes, Estrada has beaten so many champions, Milan Melendo, Tyson Hernan, Mark Hayes, Brian Valoria, unified champion, gave Roman Gonzalez, that was one of the best fights of the last 10 years, hugely competitive fight, beaten Carlos Cuadras as well, former WBC super flyweight world champion as well. And Sarusa got to go from 2 back-to-back wins over Roman, One of them was, highly contentious. I had that 8 rounds to 4 for Roman, but to go from Roman, and to Estrada, Roman's beaten 4 unified world champions, past, present, and future, beaten more champions on more jurisdictions than anybody else in boxing. So, obviously, apart from Manny Pacquiao. So, Roman's resume is outstanding, period. So, both of them, I think, have far better resumes than, Bud Crawford, Gennady Golovkin, whoever you have in your top, Anthony Joshua, even Vasily Lomachenko. These are exceptional fighters we're talking about here. Even Keith Thurman, his resume is just highly superficial. I'm sorry, but that's my immediate thoughts for the main card. I'll try and give a more definitive breakdown and try and review some of the other fights as well. I definitely want to talk about Donny Nietes. Has been one of my favourite fighters for the last 10 years, sadly overlooked, but I'll get into a more in-depth post-fight. So that's my immediate reaction. Tremendous fight, tremendous Superfly card. I'm disappointed with the decision. A draw, I think, would have been a reasonably reflective and accurate scorecard, but in hindsight, in retrospect, I think Estrada 7 rounds to 5, better defense, better counter punching throughout. Was the fresher fighter in the second half of the fight as well, and I think was beginning to take over in the championship rounds as well. So I'm disappointed, but that's my immediate reaction. Corruption Boxing, transmission over.